Hello, everyone. I am Ben Johnson, and this is the Perpetual Chess Podcast. Perpetual Chess is a weekly chess interview show where we talk with accomplished chess players, authors, and personalities about their lives, their careers, and how to improve at chess. Perpetual Chess is brought to you through the generosity of its Patreon and PayPal supporters and by Chessable.com. Hello there, listeners. We have a fun interview coming your way with Tom Vanderbilt, the author of the brand new book, Beginners. But first, I wanted to let you all know that there will be no Perpetual Chess next week. I'm finally going to take a week off. So the podcast will be back on Tuesday, January 26th. Look forward to catching you all then. But in the meantime, you can enjoy this interview and please be safe. Okay, here we go. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Perpetual Chess. We have a slightly different type of guest today. He is a best-selling author who has just released his I believe to be fifth book. It is called Beginners: The Joy and Transformative Power of Lifelong Learning. In this book, our guest, Tom Vanderbilt, learns a handful of new activities in his late 40s. These activities include surfing, singing, juggling, drawing, and yes, chess. Tom, like many adult chess enthusiasts, discovered chess through his daughter, who's school age. Her interest in the game got him interested. He spent some time working on chess and writing about it in this book, along with the other mentioned activities. I read the book and I enjoyed it. And when I had the opportunity to interview Tom, I thought the timing was great because there's so many other people interested in chess in the wake of the Queen's Gambit explosion. So I am excited to discuss the book generally and discuss Tom's experience about chess and to bring him in. So Tom Vanderbilt, thank you for joining Perpetual Chess.
Hey, thanks so much, Ben. It's great to be here. And just a quick plug for your podcast. This has been one of the, let's say, central parts of my own chess education, which is still very much, at the beginning stages, but I really enjoy it. So just a pleasure to be here.
Oh, thank you. That's nice to hear. And so, Tom, we're recording this on December 30th. Happy birthday to my mother, by the way, who probably won't listen to this. And your book comes out January 5th, 2021. Now, of course, by the time listeners hear this, it will have been out for a week or so. And I know some of my Patreon supporters are already excited for it. But I was just wondering how it feels. I mean, a lot of the chess authors I talk to are churning out books all the time, but this is years in the making for you. This is your livelihood. What's the feeling like a week before this hits the streets?
Yeah, great question. I mean, calm before the storm, I guess. But and it's been such a strange year for everyone. And this book, of course, was delayed. It was originally supposed to be out in the spring, and that just wasn't going to be possible on all sorts of fronts. Logistically, just getting printed books would have been an issue. So it's been delayed. And then what's been strange about 2020 in general for a lot of people is that, I of course did all the research for my book before that, but then, during the last year, during this past year, we've I think in a sense all been beginners. The pandemic has just totally upended certain parts of all of our lives and forced us to think about new ways of doing things. Everything from sort of working at home to juggling new types of schooling arrangements to and the last part of this is in some cases having more time because of the lockdown. People, trying to stretch themselves a little bit and suddenly look toward these things that maybe were on their sort of life bucket list of things they wanted to learn. And that's kind of the spirit that had gotten me into the whole book. So that the timing is very strange in that regard. But anyway, yeah, I'm just glad as an author releasing a book that the news cycle will have quieted down a bit in terms of larger national trends, because so there's a little bit more oxygen out there maybe for the.
Yeah, those sound like famous last words if I've ever heard them, Tom.
My book does release on the same day as the Georgia runoff elections, of course. Right. So who knows?
Yeah. So, but hopefully all will be quiet when this comes out. So did you have any thought of writing some sort of addendum based on the quarantine and the pandemic with, as you say, everyone being stuck at home and some people learning new skills?
I do. I kind of flick at that a little bit in an upcoming piece in the Wall Street Journal weekend edition, which will be out on January 2nd, which is sort of tied to the new year and sort of the idea of that cliched idea of new year, new you, which this year is sort of more true than ever, although in some ways we're rolling over into the very same kind of year, which is unfortunate. But yeah, so it's a good thought. You've given me a good idea there, and I probably should start generating some, sort of special related ideas.
Paperback edition or whatever it may be. And we should mention, as we record this, there was already a nice write-up of Tom's book in the New York Times. So reviews are starting to trickle out, which I'm sure it was a relief to see that review, Tom. At least I would think so. But let's dive into the main topic as far as our listeners are concerned, which is chess. So you again, I want listeners to know this book is 20% or so about chess. I found it worthwhile overall and read the whole thing. But, we have a hardcore chess audience, so I want people to know what they're getting. But you begin with chess for the most part. And so the first thing I was wondering is, where did chess enter into the genesis of the book project? I could tell it's one of your earlier interests, but what was the exact timeline of shaping the narrative and project of this book and your interest in chess?
We were at my family and I were at on holiday, in Florida, and we went to a local library, and my daughter was either 3 or 4 at the time, and we had been playing a bit of checkers in the library. And nearby there was a chessboard. And after we played a couple games of checkers, she saw this other board, which let's face it, looks a lot more interesting and fun than checkers. It has these really cool shaped pieces. And she said, what's that? And I said, well, that's chess. And she said, well, can we play? And I said, well, I'd love to, but I don't really know how, which was, sort of you don't like to say that as a 40-something parent about anything. I can mansplain my way out of anything, but I really did not know how to play chess. I had tried many years ago, to pick up the moves, and it just didn't stick, and it never really entered my life again, except that it was sort of always on the fringe of my imagination, something I wish I knew how to do, hadn't gotten around to doing. And so I would do something like, like a lot of people are now, see a film like The Queen's Gambit, or I'd read some reference, or I'd see those puzzles they used to have in every newspaper. There aren't as many of them now, but and I'd feel this kind of twinge of regret, like, oh, I wish I could take a crack at solving that, but I just don't know how. So I quickly did what a lot of people do now. I tried to learn myself using a lot of the online resources that are out there. At the time, I think I was doing a lot of Social Chess, the app on iPhone, and also doing some sort of rudimentary YouTube videos. And so I sort of got the basic moves, and then I was trying to explain them to her, and that was fine. But I just couldn't really take it that much further from there, because obviously a whole world of tactics and strategy was just not readily available to me. So I did what a lot of self-respecting parents do nowadays. I hired a coach. And I meant to do this really for my daughter's sake. But then I thought, well, this might be an interesting time for me to sort of jump in, because we're essentially both beginners, even though we're separated by 40 years of age, more than 40 years. So, let's see what happens. And I thought, this is kind of a neat little social science experiment with a very small sample group. But so I hired a coach, Simon Rudowski, who's a fan of this podcast, so he's probably listening. And he was game for that. I'm not sure it's a very common thing in the chess teaching world to have both a parent and a kid at the same time. It seems to be mostly just the kids, or sometimes the parents. But so then we set out on this journey that has continued to this day. And at the current moment, let's say my daughter has now eclipsed me, which I'll make the argument that it's more about just the sheer amount of work she's put into it than any kind of inherent advantage she may have as a child. But that's open for argument and discussion.
Yeah, and that's of course a topic we discuss a lot on the podcast. I mean, everyone, you write about being beaten by an 8-year-old at the Marshall Chess Club over there in Manhattan, and that's something all of us can relate to. Even experts and masters are terrified of these 9-year-olds often. So totally understandable. So it sounds like chess was kind of instrumental in the launching of the whole project. So did that form as a springboard for the sort of broader book idea, or did they kind of grow together? How did it come about?
No, it really did, because then, I sort of wrote an initial piece about this experience with chess and really kind of looking at the learning differences. But then it occurred to me, okay, wow, I've sort of picked up, basic knowledge of chess. I'm not going to exaggerate anything, but wow, this is this new thing that I didn't have access to a month ago, that has sort of opened my life in this interesting way where, it's sort of like the first time you read about some historical figure, for example, and then suddenly you feel like you're seeing that thing everywhere. Suddenly I had this sort of chess antenna that was up there, and I could, just kind of expanded my world and realizing what a rich game chess is with such a florid history and I mean, the sheer, as a writer, what the first thing that struck me is the sheer amount of literature that exists in chess. There can't be another pursuit, sport, art, discipline, whatever you'd like to call it, out there that has as much written about it. I mean, poker, probably a relative handful of books. I play Scrabble. I don't think there's really any books except the dictionary. But I mean, I just sort of felt like, wow, that this is this amazing world that I now have just the cursory sort of access to. But so then that got me thinking, wow, what other things are out there that I really have wanted to do that have just been sort of afraid of doing, haven't had the time to do. And I should say it's more really the afraid of. I think that is the key idea here. That feeling that, why would I want to be bad at something at middle age? I've spent my whole life trying to be good in my profession, hitting these sort of career benchmarks. Why would I want to go lose to kids with runny noses at the Marshall Club? How could that at all be good for me? So I then made this kind of short list of things that had always been out there, and they sort of, and I wanted, kind of big skills. I mean, there's a lot of, small things we're always learning, and that's a very valuable thing. But I wanted these things like singing that wouldn't be something you could master in a month, despite what a lot of people on the internet promise. So singing, drawing, surfing, and at the mere process of writing this book, of course, opened other doors, and I sort of got plunged into other new things, like I think a lot of us all do. If it, with the year about to end, it would be interesting for listeners, I think, to reflect back on 2020 and think, what was there something new that you learned? And I'm sure you could probably say yes, even if it's something that doesn't seem incredibly amazing, like, making sourdough bread for the first time or something like a lot of people are doing. But, that's something that you can really, look back to and grow from, I think.
Yeah, and I'm curious to hear how you compare all of these other activities. But before we do that, I want to hear a little bit more about your dive into chess, of course. So you mentioned the vast library, which it's true, I can't think of another comparable topic that has nearly as much ink spilled about it as chess. So when you start to get more interested, and as you say, you get interested in not just the strategy, but sort of the history and the world behind it. And obviously, since you were living in Brooklyn at the time, it's a pretty good place to be in terms of absorbing yourself in the chess culture. So once you know the rules of the game, what resources did you dive into? Did you have favorite YouTubers, favorite books? What would you recommend for other newer listeners? And I know that lots of chess dads listen to this podcast, and chess moms. So what any recommendations, Tom?
Sure. I mean, I would say, among the books, one of the traps that I found was that, as much as I love books, in the beginning, I just wasn't that great at following the notation, which, there's just something about that. I think that whole language really has to be internalized. So it was a challenge for me to read certain books. And of course, I guess the idea is sometimes you're supposed to play these things out on the board as well. But it was a bit overwhelming, I thought. So I really leaned heavily on Silman and just that in-person coach, which of course this year is now a virtual coach. But
right.
I think, chess is one of those things that really does transfer well online. And I think that you might not often have the money to pay for sort of a top New York City chess coach, but that online world has opened up where you might be able to find, someone who doesn't quite cost as much somewhere else. So, I really did rely on the coach. YouTube, let's see, I probably various guests of yours, Daniel Naroditsky, I really enjoy his commentary. Some of this is a bit more recent, but I still continue to profit quite a bit from it. I'm especially enjoying his, I think it's called Speedrun series, where he's trying to get up to, I guess, 3,000 in Blitz. But what's great is that, he started from 0 or 100, and you could kind of, check in at these different points where he's playing people rated 600 or whatever, and getting up to where my sort of paltry Blitz rating is about 1,300, and then going beyond that, though. And so I find his commentary very accessible. There's a lot of commentary I really enjoy. I've spent a lot of time watching Daniel King, and I love his stuff, but admittedly, in the beginning, at least, some of it is just a bit too, let's say, above my pay grade. It kind of unspooling these very long counterfactuals about, what could have happened in this regard. And I would sort of lose the plot a little bit. So, and then, all the other sorts of things that are out there, U.S. Chess, Chess Life magazine, books. I have read a few, Jeremy Silman's, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the title, has the amateur mind.
The amateur mind, yeah.
Yeah. So, of course, the word amateur was very appealing to me there. So, I wouldn't say there's one thing in particular that stands out above, sort of a collating this kind of a magpie collection of things, and that sort of tactics and strategy. And then, of course, I'm interested as well in the larger culture of the game, both sort of on the recreational, more casual level and the competitive level. So podcasts like yours, and in 2016, for example, I was able to go to the championships in New York City and just sort of immerse myself in that world, which was so eye-opening. And I was ironically supposed to write a piece for sort of a big magazine about positing chess players as athletes and talking about some of the physical and mental rigors that are gone through. And in the end, I couldn't get access to Magnus Carlsen, which was who they really wanted to hear about. So the piece was sort of scuttled. But I had a great time watching that event play out and talking to people there and just learning more about the game and the culture.
Yeah, Magnus is a tough get.
I talked to his father, who was very nice. But
yeah, great guy. Well, first of all, it sounds like you have good taste in chess content creators. I mean, Silman, of course, a legendary author, and Naroditsky and Daniel King have both been on the podcast, but I've been fans of theirs way before that. And I agree with your general assessment. Naroditsky has a very rare ability for a player of his strength to be able to explain chess across different levels. And Daniel King, I love, and he's obviously very popular and respected in the chess community, but not quite as popular as some of the other chess YouTubers. And I think it is because there's sort of a base level required in order to follow his videos. But he's one of my personal favorites as well. So good stuff. But yeah, I mean, Naroditsky is definitely a good recommendation for anyone newer to chess. Silman's books, Levy Rozman's been doing a good job, explaining things to a broad level of players. And of course, I'm always a fan of John Bartholomew's Climbing the Rating Ladder and his Chess Fundamentals series. So lots of stuff for people to dive into. So I want to talk a bit more about chess, Tom, but first let's take a break and hear from our friends at Chessable, who you also mentioned in the book. If you are newer to chess, like this week's guest, then you may want to do what he did and check out many of the courses offered on Chessable.com. They have tons of great content for beginners, including the How Good Is Your Chess series by Grandmaster Daniel King, the Winning Chess series by Grandmaster Yasser Salwan, and Mastering Pawn Endgames, which was recently recommended by adult improver Martin Eustason. So lots of stuff to learn. All of it has Move Trainer technology to help you remember the new ideas and patterns that you learn. And there's even free offerings of this vein. So go to Chessable.com and please take a look around. So Tom, being that my friends at Chessable are a sponsor of the show, I can't help but ask you what you tried out on their platform.
I'm currently making my way through 100 Endgames You Should Know, which I think is produced by New in Chess. Because admittedly, the Endgame is a particular weakness of mine. And obviously, being a fundamental part of the game, that this is a problem. But I'm sort of one of those people who's always trying to wrap things up whenever possible, or leave the endgame in such a favorable position to me that it's not so much an issue. But yeah, I've lost a lot of let's say endgames on sheer fundamentals. So just trying to go through that, and it's I sort of love that title, and it's kind of like 100 books you should read before you die or something. It makes me feel a little bit guilty, like here's another thing I need to know, 100 things I need to know. But yeah, I find it very useful. And what I was saying before about books, what's so great about this sort of development of content online is just being able to not just read the notation and try to do that in your head, but being able to sort of push those pieces digitally as you're doing it, and then that repetition. I mean, that just almost burning in the sheer muscle memory, and of course, and then bringing in other ideas that have gained prominence in learning, like spaced repetition. So it's just it's a valuable resource, and of course, like chess itself, is just vast, and I could spend the rest of my life and not unlock all of the content there. But it is one of those things that I reach for. And I should say, and I'm not sure how this plays out with other listeners. I don't go to it as much as I should. Let's say I find myself drawn to the sort of easy dopamine hit of a 5-minute blitz game or a longer thing. And my Simon or other people have constantly told me, you need to just do more study, don't just play blitz. And I know some people argue that blitz is counterproductive to one's play in classical chess or longer games, but obviously not at the grandmaster level, really. But it's hard to without some sort of plan or program to have that discipline. So it's just another thing I'm always sort of kicking myself about.
Yeah, it's very relatable. I certainly struggle with it even. I mean, I'd still like to get better. And yeah, there's an element of heavy lifting for some of the harder core chess training. And it's so much easier just to relax and play a game when you have other responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And it strikes me, I mean, 100 Endgames You Must Know, it's a classic and it's perfect for the Chessable format, as you say, with spaced repetition. But it gets pretty advanced. So, I mean, some of the early material in that course, I think, would be great for you. But are you working through the whole thing, or how are you approaching it?
Yeah, I'll try. I don't know if there's another way or a better way, but yeah, I'm sort of a completist, so I'll just try to.
Wow.
And I mean, but here's the thing: working through it is one thing, but how much it sticks or how much I'm actually comprehending, because there is the thing that it will give you. It will give you the answer. I mean, it will affect your overall score, I suppose. But and this is where at the end of the day, another thing I should have mentioned earlier about what I was using in the learning was, of course, play itself. And at first, that was all just digital and virtual games, and I kind of tried to climb very slowly through the ratings as one does. But then then it sort of branched out. We would find my daughter and we would find little tournaments at the local library in the basement, and sort of showed a bit of promise there. So that built up my confidence. And then for the most part, I was taking her to tournaments in the kind of classic New York City scholastic competitive chess world, which is very time consuming and rewarding also. But during those games, as I write in the book, I would have 5 or 6 hours to basically try to find things to do. Sometimes I would practice chess. Other times I would just look at Twitter. But then other places like the Brooklyn Strategist, which was close to my home, would have sort of Tuesday night matches. And then finally the Marshall Club, the ultimate pilgrimage in New York City, where I managed to get in some games before the whole pandemic arrived, which was good.
Yeah. It's good that you got that made it to the book, because it's definitely a quintessential New York experience, as well as a great place just to play. So what's going on? Is your daughter still interested in chess, and how's her game progressing?
She is. I mean, it's been strange, of course, with the move to virtual and her OTB rating is sort of frozen, and she's continued to play though, and Simon has arranged a sort of group of students who are doing these international tournaments with other kind of scholastic organizations or coaches teams, and so that's almost sort of a weekly thing. And then there's a team meeting on Monday that to go over the weekend's events. So in some ways she's playing more than ever, which is funny because it's a lot easier for her to just go up to her room to do a tournament than for me to take her to PS6 or whatever. But one thing that's been a factor, and I'm sure for other parents out there might relate to this, is knowing how much to push and how much to sort of just let her explore the game to the extent that she wants to. I mean, I sort of got into this with no grand plan other than to let her learn the game. And then, we definitely sort of caught the competitive bug. And like a lot of people, I kind of always thought of chess as a intellectual pursuit. So I thought, wow, that must be really good for her. So I got, better that than playing some mindless video game, for example. So she sort of waxed and waned like a lot of kids probably do in the level of resolve. And there have definitely been times when she wanted to quit, and I didn't sort of push too hard. But yeah, she continues to play well, and I'm proud to say, she's up there on the list of sort of top, female players for her age. So and I should say we're not maniacal about it. She has a lot of interests. I mean, she's kind of obsessed by Roblox programming right now, scripting and all that. So, if she poured the amount of energy into chess that she does currently with Roblox, she'd probably have like 300 more rating points. But I'm trying to be open-minded about it and not be too tyrannical.
Yeah, it's a constant challenge as a parent. I definitely relate to that, and I'm try to restrain myself as well from being too pushy. But it's great to hear that she's still doing well. And as you say, it will be interesting how all the ratings shake out once we can finally get back to some sort of normal life. And hearing you talk about your daughter and her being on the top girls list for U.S. chess makes me think of one thing you mentioned in the book. I believe it was in the surfing chapter where one of the one of the teachers mentioned that they felt that women made better students in beginner classes than men. Was that in the surfing chapter, Tom?
I think it is, and the idea was basically more of a humility, more of a willingness to be vulnerable and to be cooperative and to have a little bit less ego tied up in the whole pursuit of learning something. Yeah, this was surfing where they said the surfing instructor mentioned that a lot of male students will come in just with this idea that I'm going to crush this like the first day, and of course they get their behind kicked. But and I did find this throughout all of the pursuits, with the possible exception of chess, which definitely tilts a little bit more male in the worlds I've seen. But that the classes I was in, for example, tended to be dominated by women. I just feel like there is more of a socially a kind of an open-mindedness, a willingness to learn new things, a desire to learn new things. I mentioned this sort of open water swim camp we were doing in the Bahamas, like out in the ocean for hours at a time, and I was the only man except for one of the instructors, and these were some women going into their 70s who were just killing it in the water, and leaving me, someone who thinks they're in pretty good shape, just although not at swimming, but leaving me in the dust. Well, not in the dust, but in their wake, let's say. So, I kind of was heartened by this. Chess. I mean, there is a lot of progress there. I think the New York City scholastic world certainly saw a lot of female players. My daughter has done. There's a group called Her Move Next, which does a lot of girls only events in New York City. So that things like that were good, I think, for also building that sense of cultural identity. I mean, at the end of the day, it was good for her to just be playing whoever. And something I do talk about in the book is this idea of stereotype threat, which is the psychological phenomenon that a person can internalize a negative stereotype about themselves and perform worse because of it. And one of the stereotypes that's still out there is that boys are better at chess than women or girls. So the interesting study, sort of looked at girls who are playing boys, and they actually did worse in the matches than their ratings would have predicted ahead of time. So it's clearly a very real dynamic going on. And I would find this as well myself with my daughter when she'd be playing a lower rated boy, and just kind of that sense of panic would set in. I think she's gotten over that a bit, but I'm sure it never completely leaves.
Yeah. I do think organizations like her move next, and of course the work that Jen Shahade and U.S. Chess Women is helping. But it's a long road. It's a steep hill to climb. So, but I'm glad your daughter's involved and enjoying it, and hopefully not feeling harangued in any way.
Well, and just one thought here is that it'd be an interesting follow-up study, because the world of online chess is often cloaked in anonymity. You don't really know who you're playing at. It would be sort of funny to replicate that experiment in that setting and see if female players actually do better per those original results. Because this is something that I found was very eye-opening for me. Playing my first tournament at the Marshall, I was absolutely petrified. It's one thing to sort of sit there in your easy chair at home and be kind of, on the computer, which is a very comfortable environment, but just to sit, and, a lot of your listeners may not remember this moment if they're advanced players, but, just to sit across from this human who's, sort of glaring at you or looking nice or whatever, and you're trying to focus on your game, but you're also picking up all these little subtle signals from them. And of course, a lot of when you're playing an 8-year-old, there's often all sorts of strange little tics that they may have, or start whistling or drumming their fingers on the board. And this just completely threw me for a loop. So, I guess this is why we have things like, I mean, as I understand, the online rating is a bit, different from the OTB rating. I mean, for these, I don't know if that's the reason why, but I just found it to be a completely different experience. And really the only way to get better, I think, at tournament chess is to actually play in real tournaments. So it was incredibly eye-opening. And now, of course, I've kind of forgotten what that's like over the last year.
Yeah, it's amazing how different it feels. It just feels so much more heightened. The stakes feel so much higher when, as adults like ourselves, it doesn't really impact our daily existence. It doesn't really change our family dynamics, or it shouldn't. It doesn't change our financial situations. But when you sit down to play a game across from someone, it feels so huge.
Yeah, and I'm a journalist, a writer, so my whole life is sort of sitting and listening to people and being very attentive to what they're saying and paying very close attention to what they're trying to tell me. So I also overthink things a lot. So I would see a player would sort of make a little chuckle under their breath or something, and this would send me into a tailspin of anxiety. I'm like, what did they mean by that? And this is why I've always been terrible at poker. The very little that I've played of it is just that I'm not very good at bluffing. The whole psychological element is not good for me. That's one aspect where I appreciate online chess, is that stuff is gone. And this, of course, you don't forget to mute the comments. I was just playing a game the other night, and someone immediately typed "you lose" as I started a game, and of course I won. And I try to rise above this, but I couldn't resist typing a little comeback.
Right. It's so hard. Yeah.
So anyway, dude.
Yeah, we all turn into children behind our computers. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the other parts of the book. You mentioned, we talked a bit about the surfing chapter, which I think was my favorite. But one thing I was curious about, as I'm, I think, 9 years younger than you, I'm 43, was the juxtaposition or the difference between doing physical activities and doing something mental. And then I guess something like the drawing class might be somewhere in between. But were you more or less intimidated for something like surfing or juggling as compared to chess?
Probably, I think, because again, there's that connection between brain and body. You're not just having to think through something, which but to send that aging body out into the waves, or to try to handle multiple objects in the air at once is something that's not going to be quite as easy for me, because for a variety of reasons. But and I should say though that what's interesting about the research that I kind of unlocked doing this book is that something like singing, I think a lot of us culturally just think of it as this God-given gift, like that person has a great voice, and the idea is that they're born with this immense talent. I mean, the reality is that singing, as much as surfing, is a motor skill that you need to practice endlessly, using particular drills to sort of get your vocal apparatus in the right shape to produce the sounds that you need to produce it. And then this is not to say that some people may not inherently have sort of an interesting tone to their voice or a sound that sort of sets them apart, but they still have to work awful hard at that. So but this kind of that brain body connection is very interesting. Another thing I was doing was making trying to make a wedding ring to replace, I lost two of them surfing, because when you surf in cold water, your finger shrinks, of course. So I lost two rings, which my wife was not too thrilled about. But I was trying to make this ring with this friend of mine who's an expert jeweler, and just you could sort of feel as you were doing this, you're trying to teach your fingers these new ways to hold objects, to use tools, and you could really feel this two-way communication between your hand and your body, and that's something that in chess, there's, I guess you could sort of move the pieces with a certain flourish, as some grandmasters might do, but beyond that, it's really pretty much a mental pursuit. I mean, it's a very varied mental pursuit with visualization and pattern recognition and memory and all that. But so yeah, but to finally answer your question, I did find the stuff like surfing just harder, and there, I ended up, as I mentioned in the book, going to the hospital because of surfing. I ended up on my head underwater and did some, luckily, minor spinal damage, but I've never been injured playing chess.
Right.
my ego has been shattered many times, but no bones broken.
Yeah, I've always been interested in surfing, and the book you mentioned by the New Yorker writer, I'm drawing a blank on his name.
William Finnegan.
Yeah, I even dug into that at some point, although I didn't make it through it just because it was a little, similar to when you're thrown in the deep water in chess, no pun intended. It was a little too advanced for me.
Well, and that brings up a good point that I wanted to sort of mention, when we were talking about some of the YouTube resources. There's just, I mean, Finnegan just sort of presumes that you already know what a certain kind of wave looks like or where a certain break is. And that, it can be some of the challenge with trying to learn chess, is that people will throw out words like Caro-Kann or, Rubinstein, they'll throw out these names that are shorthand and should be immediately known by anyone who really knows the game, but pretty much leave the normal person, flat-foot immediately. So just to go back to Daniel Naroditsky, I appreciate that he never neglects to sort of mention what an opening is, because this is something that I still haven't, quite memorized all the, I know what they are when I see them sort of, but it's just a very simple step though but it speaks to this idea of trying to learn, and who should we try to learn from? And, there's an argument out there that in the beginning, you don't necessarily want to be learning from, let's say, a grandmaster, that, maybe it would be better to learn from a lower rated player who can sort of has a better idea of where you are as a player in the absolute, stunning lack of knowledge that you have. But, for certain experts, it becomes difficult for them to actually to be able to explain how they got where they are, or how they do what they do, because so much of something like expert surfing is just pure automatic behavior that if they actually stop to think about it, they would screw up the activity. They just proceed based on this intense stuff that they've kind of memorized.
Yeah, you say in the book that you don't want Messi teaching you soccer, which is I've raised similar points on the podcast, because grandmasters in chess, which of course is the field I know better, it comes so easily to them that it can be hard to explain for someone newer to chess.
Yeah, and of course I would happily take, if any grandmasters are out there listening, I would happily accept a lesson from you. But it's yeah, so
Yeah, and that is again what makes excuse me, Daniel Naroditsky's communications abilities special. So, in all of these activities, Tom, I imagine you were doing them somewhat concurrently. Were there any lessons you drew sort of across disciplines that you found particularly helpful for chess?
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of these activities I was doing had shared moments where I could transfer some bit of learning, some sort of takeaway. Trying to think of something. For example, in surfing, I was told by an instructor in Costa Rica that, when you catch a great wave, don't pat yourself too much on the back. Don't think you've got it nailed, because there may have been an element of randomness to that, where you just sort of got lucky. By the same logic, don't beat yourself up too much if you wipe out, because again, you might have almost had it. There might have been some little imperceptible thing that threw you off. It doesn't mean you're a terrible surfer. It just, we have to accept a certain amount of randomness in this. And I think chess, that's slightly less applicable, but I think in a game, especially like Blitz, I try to keep that in mind after I sort of win, and think, obviously the idea of luck is absent in chess, but there is the idea of luck because someone made a stupid blunder, I suppose. And that comes up much more in Blitz. So, and by the same token, when I lose, I try not to get too dispirited. I do have sort of a built-in tripwire, if you will. If I lose more than 2 games in a row, I sort of step away, because I find that I'm just trying to sort of rage play my way out of that losing streak, and that just brings up another idea that I'm then focusing on winning, which I think can be an oddly counterproductive thing, rather than, and this is something I also picked up in a lot of the different pursuits I was doing, is don't focus so much on some end goal, like becoming a great surfer, becoming this, becoming that, executing this move. Just, focus more on the process itself and what it's going to take to get there, and don't get too discouraged when that falls apart. Just jump back on. But I find that often, if people want to take up something new, they might go into it with the idea that I'm going to take up painting, and it's going to change my life. It's going to be my passion. You hear sort of, I find that word is a very dangerous word. And there's an interesting book called The Passion Paradox by Brad Stuhlberg, which refers to some research by Carol Dweck, who's has a psychologist who's done this work on mindset. She's become very known for that, which is this idea that, basically going into something, mindset is sort of behind the whole premise of my book, in that if I thought I was too old to learn all these new things, or that they weren't going to help me in my career, or that it was a waste of time, that's obviously a very, that is not a growth mindset, as she would say, and is very self-debilitating. But, if you put yourself in this other position, that all these things are possible, that just obviously unlocks all these things. But another part of this is that when you begin a new activity, when you see something that has caught your attention that you'd like to try, there can be a danger into, assuming that it needs to be a passion, which is a word you see used out there a lot. Like something is my passion, or somebody wants something to be their passion. Like, I'm going to pick up painting and it's going to change my life. I mean, the problem with thinking in terms of things as a passion is that it then assumes that you're sort of going to have to do less work, that the motivation question is going to be taken care of by this inherent passion, which is often not the case. And then the minute that some difficulty arises in your learning struggle, as it inevitably will, you're going to feel this sense of betrayal, and maybe this wasn't my passion after all. The whole spirit of my book was really not. I wasn't sure that any of these things were going to change my life, and I definitely didn't think I was going to be very good at any of them, because famously the Anders Ericsson research about 10,000 hours. As I mentioned in the book, I would be lucky to have 100 hours for something like chess. I probably put more into it than that, but certainly not 10,000 hours. So the idea is, things don't have to be. Don't go in with that idea that it has to be something, and don't think it has to be one thing. Take up 4 or 5 new skills the way I tried to do, and see what really sticks, and maybe they'll speak to each other in interesting ways that you can profit from. And I would say that, let's say chess. I'm like every chess player. I'm sure I would wish my rating were higher, but I've taken away so much more than that sort of numerical, benchmark from this game, and it's just opened my life and world in so many ways. Just to give one small example, I was in the Netherlands a while ago doing writing an article about a guy named Tim Krabbe, who's a writer.
Legend.
Well, yeah, he's a writer. He wrote a book that I really enjoy called The Racer, which is about The Rider, which is a single novel about a bike race in southern France. He also famously wrote The Vanishing, which became kind of a creepy movie with Rutger Hauer. But anyway, Tim is also an accomplished chess player and author, and he gave me a book of his puzzles that I really enjoy. But so I was interviewing him, and we were already bonding about cycling. But then, I was lucky to be able to play a few chess games with him, and he of course, blew me away. But I was able to kind of access that side of his personality, and at least I was conversant enough, to at least make it to the middle game. And I still can remember the words in his sort of terse Dutch accent. I think he said something like, "Remember, the queen can also go backwards," as he captured some piece that I had left hanging. So, but just one example of the way that has expanded my world. Or, with the Queen's, I know you've probably been talking about the Queen's Gambit forever. And as a writer, by the way, I do, really love the book, and was able to have recommended it to all sorts of people, like my daughter's coach. But it's nice to kind of just be able to glean that little, to be able to latch on to something like that with a little bit more in sense of investment and knowledge, rather than just have it be like this backdrop. Oh, they're playing chess, and aren't they clever? And so anyway, so is it my passion? I'm not sure. I like the game a lot. I'm not amazing. I have my moments, and I recently, my daughter's coach, Silman, held a tournament for his adult students online, just a little Sunday morning thing. And I actually won that. So, was it like Marshall 2100 and under? No, but these things are, it doesn't sort of matter where you are. You take away, I think, the same amount of satisfaction from a victory like that. And of course, had I lost, had I finished at the bottom, that would have been a rich experience too, because I'd have so much to learn from those losses, which is something that I think of all these pursuits, chess has been the one where the idea of learning and feedback and sort of knowledge is so instrumental. And the amount of time spent analyzing often exceeds the actual duration of the game, which I find sort of fascinating. And I think I mentioned to you before, I was sort of I never made it to graduate school, but chess it seems like a graduate degree. And to be a grandmaster must be getting like definitely a PhD, maybe a law degree on top of that.
It's good that you appreciate that. When first time I interviewed Grandmaster Jesse Cry, he has a PhD in philosophy, and he said that becoming a grandmaster, and he had to really grind for it. He's obviously an incredible player, but he's not a 2700. He's a 2500, and he said it was harder than getting a PhD.
Oh, really? Well, and this is as much as I enjoy the Queen's Gambit. I mean, I think this is one thing that it sort of didn't quite represent as well as it could have, but it's impossible to do that. I mean, number one, the entire series takes as much time to watch as a single well thought out classical match. I mean, and the idea that this is a person's entire life that they captured in that story, but that 5 or 6 hours, that's just one game. And the sort of sheer stamina to sit, to sit through that and to be fighting with someone, not just to sit. And Robert Hess, I talked to him. He gave me the example that it was like doing the SATs twice in a row. and someone's like, and they're fighting back at you. Someone's trying to defeat you in the SAT. So the Queen's Gambit. Someone else made the point that in the novel, the character is presented as a bit more, a bit less self-assured. I think the one thing the show kind of glossed over, made a little bit of the Hollywood treatment, was that the character was more physically attractive than is presented in the book, and just. You had the sense watching the Queen's Gambit that she could have really succeeded, I think, in anything she put her mind to. But in the book, chess is really held out as this sort of lifeline for this character, Beth Harmon, who, like, this is her one shot. And if she doesn't make it, she doesn't have a lot of other options. So that which I think I would urge people, if they haven't, to read Walter Tevis's original novel. Just for comparison.
Yeah, I definitely need to do that. And I love the show, but I share your criticism that there wasn't that much struggle along the way. One other thing I wanted to add for listeners before you guys email me, the aforementioned Tim Crabb, by the way, he has an amazing website. It's a little bit hard to find, but it's called Chess Curiosities. In the same vein as the book, just tons of like the best games of all time, the best moves of all time. And the guy is just like a walking chess encyclopedia, in addition to being like a legendary writer about cycling, as Tom says, especially in the Netherlands. And yes, I will try at some point to get him on the podcast. I don't know if it will be workable or not, but I just wanted to preempt that because he's on my list for sure. He's someone I would absolutely love to talk to.
Well, and I would just in terms of any sort of older listeners out there, one thing about Tim as well, when I was over there, I went out for a ride, actually several rides with his cycling group, and Tim was celebrating, I forget exactly which birthday, but somewhere in his 70s. And I mean, riding in the Netherlands is a bit of a challenge because it's flat, but there are these strong winds that come along. So if you're not in the right position when a wind comes along, you can be dropped from the pack, the peloton. I should just say about Tim Crabb, and especially for any older listeners who are out there, Tim, when I was in Amsterdam, I was able to go out for a couple of rides with his cycling group, and he was celebrating, I think, a birthday in his 70s, early 70s, I believe. But Tim absolutely not only destroyed me on the chessboard, but he left me and his group and him left me behind on a ride. I mean, the guy is an absolute beast on the bike at a somewhat more advanced age than myself. So just sort of a lesson out there as to what can still be accomplished, as you get older. But very interesting guy all the way around.
Yeah, definitely. Subject of much intrigue in the chess world, and it would be great to talk to him. So Tom, I think I want to thank you for being so generous with your time. I think I just have one more question, which is at the end of the book, when you're sort of tying it together, and as you have in this interview, you mentioned that it's not really about, to use the cliche, not about the destination. It's not about mastery, which certainly in the chess world is something we can, it's so easy to get obsessed with the next benchmark, but at some point, there's something to be said for just playing for the enjoyment of the game, which is why I won't admonish you too much for playing a lot of blitz. But you mentioned that there are some activities that you're sort of more eager to stick with than others, and you didn't say one way or the other where you felt about chess in that landscape. So, what do you think? Are you still going to be playing much?
Oh, indeed. Yeah. And I really, I think any learner goes through a period where they, and there have been various theories about this, you sort of have these moments where you make a lot of progress, then you hit the plateau, then you make another set of progress, then you hit another plateau. And you sort of go through these stages. And there's these brothers, they're named Dreyfus. There were these academics that came up with this 5-stage theory of learning. And, as a novice, everything's sort of great. There are very few expectations about you. You're open to learning everything. Progress, your very basic progress comes very fast. But then you sort of like hit this next stage of what do they call it? The advanced beginner and then intermediate. But what happens, a couple of things shift during those moments. The main thing being that you have to begin to own your knowledge a little bit and own your performance, and you suddenly can't get away with making those beginner's mistakes. And with knowledge comes responsibility, I guess here. But I would say, just in terms of mastery, I don't want to sound like I'm anti-mastery at all. It's a wonderful thing. I wish I could be I shouldn't say, I wish I could be a chess grandmaster. I'm sure it's sort of like possible in some way, but I just don't have the sheer time. But I don't think it has to be an either or thing, like mastery or nothing. That there is obviously a great scale and spectrum of experience that's open to all people. So one other point here is that with learning, I think, there's certain things that are important: motivation, and then just how much you can actually fold something into your life. And this is a benefit that chess being much more portable than something like surfing, where I have to sort of wait for the right day to come along with the right weather conditions. My own schedule has to be open. I have to, be able to make it to the beach. I don't live right on the beach. It's more of a challenge. The feedback loops are much more stretched out there. It takes me longer to sort of get back into it. With the rise of online chess in particular, this is something that's available to everyone at all times, 24/7. So that has made it, that just makes it an easier thing to do and to learn. So I think that's maybe an underappreciated aspect of learning. It's just, we respond to things that we can, that are easy in a way. Not easy to actually get good at, but easy to access. So I'll definitely still be out there on chess if anyone would like to take a whack at me and probably easily defeat me. I play under the name Werner Herzog on Lee Chess, after the German film director, of course, which is just another psychological trick to make people wonder if they're playing the real Werner Herzog.
Right.
Anyway.
Excellent. Yeah, well, I'm sure you'll get some takers, and I'll link to Tom's Lee Chess handle in the show description, as well as all the places you can get the book. And by the time this interview comes out, it should be widely available. And Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's going to be available in audiobook too, right?
Yes, that I read myself, and there's also a UK edition, and there's going to be some other editions in countries like the Ukraine. So yeah, hopefully, I'm sure you have a global audience, and if people don't want it in English, there will be all sorts of other editions as well. Excellent.
Yeah, and I know that there aren't that many chess-themed audiobooks, so people will be glad to check this out. Well, good stuff, Tom. Congratulations. I really enjoyed the book, and I love to see sort of the outsider's perspective and appreciation for chess.
Thanks. It was an absolute pleasure to be here, and I will continue to listen with great interest and delight.
Okay, that's good to hear. All right, have a good day, Tom.
Okay, you too. Thanks.
Thanks, as always, to my producer, Matthew Passy, and to everyone who helps spread the word about the show, telling your friends, writing positive reviews on podcast platforms. All of that stuff helps. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at BennyFishel1. Join the Perpetual Chess Facebook group. You can find the link on the website, and we are back in action on Instagram at Perpetual Chess, sharing a weekly clip from the podcast. So follow us over there as well. But of course, the main purpose of these credits is to thank everyone who makes the show possible by their financial support. Without you all, Perpetual Chess would have ceased to exist a long time ago, and for that I am forever grateful and work to continually improve and expand the offerings from Perpetual Chess. So without further ado, I would like to give extra special thanks to the following people and entities: Chessable.com, David Lazarus of LazmanChess.com, Quality Chess Books, the Capital City Chess Club, the Abysmal Deaths of Chess blog, Adapta Interactive Web Designs and Services, the Apprentice Twitch channel, Andrew Alharji, Andrew Bach, Aniti Deer, Austin Clough, Benjamin Porteau, Bill Sigler, Kathy Carr, Chad Oliver, the Charlotte Chess Center, the Chess Central's Chess blog, Chessmood.com, Chris Flanagan, Chris Lott, Dan O'Hanlon, Daniel He, Danny Davidson, David Schreiber, Derek Jones. I am Dimitri Schneider. I am Eric Rosen, Eric Tam, Ewan Richardson, Farhan Thawar, Faraz Sawaf, Gary Foreman, Glenn Downing, Greg Harfst, Greg Shahadi, Gregory Gulick, Guven Manet, James Kennedy, Jeff Martinson, Jens Green, Jeremy Nielsen, John Jernigan, John Rockefeller, John Cromartie, John MacArthur, Kelly Palmer, Kevin O'Callaghan, King Selt, Lucio Casada Silva, the law offices of Stuart Katz, Matthew Feeney, Michael Cann, FM Michael Oblin, Mike Zelazny, Mr. Mike Shahadi, the famous Mr. Dodgy, the Nerdnaze Twitch channel, Peter Sodi, the Playmore Chess Academy of the Hampton Chess Club, Reuven Fisher, the Seattle Chess Club, Shane Unger, Stephen Kelty, Stephen Martinez, Thomas Stanix, Thomas Tachenko, Todd Bryan of StrongChess.com, Todd Kennedy, the Vintage Patzers, which is a Chess.com improver group, Wayne Beam, William Hogarth, Aaron Waffler, Ace Viega, Adam Ralph of ChessEngland.com, Adrian Gutierrez, Alex Payhouse, FM Andre Terakov, Dr. Andrew Perry, Barry Hessian, Bill Juniper, Bill Moran, Brad and Andy Rosen, Brett Howard Lynn, Brian Mullis, Bruce Scott, Brian Tillis of Palm Beach Chess, Chad Hilton, Dr. Charles Snodgrass, Chris Wainscott, Christopher Baumgartner, Christopher Chabris, Christopher Wood, I am Christoph Zalecki, aka Chess Explained, Coach J's Chess Academy, Corey Budson, Costa Chorus, Courtney Fry, Craig Mallon, Daniel Ginsberg, Daniel Naylor, Dave Saylor, David Bleskacek, David Brown, David Hamlin, David Cramley, Dalen Shelton, Dennis Parrish, Dirk Decker, FM Donnie Ariel, Douglas Matthew, Dwayne Edmonds, Ed Daly, Emmanuel Langlois Robitaille, Ethan Smith, Hallelujah Cat, Ian Mason, Indrick Ryland, Felipe Melo Pereira, Fox Valley Chess Club, Francis Letarte Lavoie, Dr. Frank Torres, Frank Zananis, Gary Andrews, Gary Lewis, Geert Vanderveld, Gene Stewart, Gerard Barta, Giovanni Russo, Hans Schut, Harish Srinivasan, Howard Vihan, Jacob Kovacs, Jacob Turan, Jacques Perry, James Aspinwall, James Banastia, James Muir, Jason Willem, J.G. Chakrabarty, Jeff Anderson, Jeffrey Martello, Yep Hoyland, Jerry Wells, Jim Ratliff, John Tully, Juan Almaguer, Dr. John Fallon, John Fernandez, John Fontaine, John Hartman, John Jeffrey, John McMurtry, Jonathan Slater, John Tully, Jose Rodriguez, Justin Gardner, WGM Jen Shahadi, Joel Rocky, John Thompson, Grandmaster Josh Friedel, I am Kare Christensen, WGM Katerina Nemtsova, Kelly Palmer, Kevin Boyce, Kevin Pryor, Kiora Gata of the Lakeshore Chess Club, I am Kostya Kavutsky, Krishna Gopala Krishnan, Kyle McAvoy, Larry Ryforth, Laura Belyovsky, Macaulay Peterson, Mark Miller, Martin Knudsen, Martin Krug, Matthew Passy, Matthew Tedesco, Matthias Plock, the Mechanics Institute Chess Club of San Francisco, Michael Allard, Michael Hudson, Miguel Aristide, Mike Clem, Mitchell Fabian, Nate Salon, Neil Bruce, Nigmat Mulajanov, Nicholas Isabel, Olaf Mueller-Michaels, GM Pascal Charbonneau, Passy Passanen, Paul Bain, Paul Clarkson, Paul Sweeney, Paulo Santana, Peter Lux, Randy Tempo, Ricky Grijalva, Richard Hallenbuck, Robert Tichy, Robert Turner, Rory Coleman, Roy Yearwood, Ryan Berg, the Say Chess YouTube channel, Scott Doherty, Scott McKinnon, Sebastian Finsterwater, Walder, Shane Unger, the Silver Knights in Richmond, Stefan Roller, WGM Tatyev Abrahamian, Tim Brennan of TacticsTime.com, Tim Seymour, Timothy Ha, Tom Edsel, Tomas Komanich, Tony Rotella, Tyron Price, Vishnu Srikumar, William H. Brock, William Juniper, William Peterson, FM Zhao Cheng of Chess1000.com, and of course, Zhivko Stoyanov. Thanks for listening, everyone. We will be back next week with another episode of Perpetual Chess.